Welcome back to Know for a Fact. Serial killers have become a huge inspiration for TV series and films in the last few years because they seem so fascinating to people. Someone who cold-heartedly murders several people without any kind of remorse can truly be shocking. Through the years, there have been reports of murders and deaths at the hands of killers across the world. Their stories are now an entertainment medium for the curious public. In this list of serial killer facts, let's dive deep into the minds of these normal people turned psychopaths. Here are 10 chilling facts about serial killers. Everything might not always be what it seems. A churchgoer could also be a serial killer. Dennis Rader was also called BTK Killer. BTK stands for bind, torture, and kill. With at least 10 victims in the 1970s to the 1990s at Kansas, Rader was low on the radar as suspicious. He was a husband, father of 2 children, a Club Scout leader, and he was also a devout churchgoer. Rader was a compliance supervisor in Kansas, and this is where his first killings began. According to records, his co-workers were his first victims. Right after that, Rader also killed his co-worker's husband and children. Unlike other killers that hide in the dark, Rader leaves crumbs for the police to find. He sent cryptic letters to the police and media all those years of his murders. Rader eventually got arrested after one of the floppy disks he sent was traced to his church. The killer's DNA gave away his freedom, and he pleaded guilty with 10 consecutive counts of life terms. He's currently at Kansas El Dorado Correctional Facility serving his time. Next up, a serial killer who was given 200 years for murdering prostitutes. During the 1990s in New York, Joel Rifkin is out and about strangling and killing prostitutes. Rifkin's an unemployed landscaper living with his mom in Long Island. His tactic was to pick up prostitutes on the street and then he'd strangle them while taking their things. On June 28, 1993, his car was pulled over by the police and they found a dead woman in the trunk. Rifkin went on trial and confessed to the murder of 17 women. However, his attorneys came to the rescue and justified that he was suffering from a mental illness. Nevertheless, he has 200 years of sentence in prison and currently at New York's Clinton Correctional Facility for his incarceration. Let's take a look at the Green River serial killer. Washington State's Green River Killer is also one of the infamous serial killers of all time. Gary Leon Ridgway lurked in the 1980s to 1990s to target prostitutes and runaways. The Green River serial killer. Washington State's Green River Killer is also one of the most infamous serial killers of all time. Gary Leon Ridgway lurked and targeted prostitutes and runaways in the 1980s to 1990s. He was given that nickname because he leaves his victims' bodies at the Green River banks after killing them. In the trial, he pleaded guilty and confessed to murdering 48 victims, and in 2011, a 4th slaying was charged as well. He's currently at the Washington State Penitentiary serving his time for a life sentence. There was a time when a serial killer targeted drug users. Chester Dwayne Turner was married and had 4 kids while he was on a killing spree for drug users. His location centered on the south of Los Angeles between the 1980s and the 1990s. Turner was already in prison for rape when police charged him with the murder of 10 women. Before he was charged, David Allen Jones, a janitor who was mentally challenged, was put into prison for 9 years for a crime that Turner committed. Thankfully, they found out the truth after Turner's DNA samples matched that of the samples from the crime scene forensics. In 2017, he was sentenced to the death penalty for the slaying of 10 women, and an additional 4 murders were added in 2014. Turner is currently at the San Quentin State Prison serving his time and waiting for the day of his execution. Do you know how some people abuse those who are helpless and can't do anything? That's how Anthony Sowell took advantage of his victims. In the state of Ohio in the year 2000s, he preyed on women victims that were homeless or struggling with abusive drugs. Sowell would invite these women to his house, offer them food and beer, and eventually kill them. According to his statements, he had the urge to kill these kinds of victims because they reminded him of his ex-girlfriend who did him wrong. All his victims were strangled and then buried inside his property. On October 31, 2009, he got arrested for sexual assault, and after a house sweep, several bodies were found inside his property. Because of this, he got the death penalty via lethal injection. But in 2021, he already died in prison. There's a serial killer who was once in the Army. That's right. Robert Lee Yates was a former pilot for the National Guards and the Army. But one secret he kept close was that he had a thirst for killing prostitutes. He committed these crimes in Washington state from the 1970s until the 1990s. On April 18, 2000, Yates got arrested after a prostitute's blood sample matched the blood found in Yates' car. Thanks to DNA and the advanced technology of science, he was easily linked to 12 other murders. During his trial, he pleaded guilty in the hopes of getting a life sentence instead of the death penalty. But up to this day, he's still on death row at the Washington State Penitentiary awaiting his execution. Think about this. There could also be a female serial killer. It might sound odd to others, but yes, not all serial killers are men. There are women too. Aileen Wuornos had a history of prostitution, drug abuse, and robbery. She started killing men who picked her up for sex on the interstate of Florida between 1989 to 1999. According to her, she only killed them because of self-defense. Wuornos claimed to have been repeatedly raped and beaten by these men. Richard Mallory, her first victim, was a sex offender. On January 9, 1991, she got arrested after her lover reported all the murders to the police in exchange for her freedom. Her lawyers tried to bail her out on the grounds of having borderline personality disorder, but she was still found guilty by the jury. On October 9, 2020, her execution took place after saying that if she got released, she would still find a way to kill again. Creepy stuff, right? Did you know that there is no distinct pattern for serial killers? Movies and social bias descriptions would often portray killers as middle-aged sadistic white men who have sexual motives. While some serial killer profiles fit this image is often misinterpreted. If one would take a closer look, the serial killers, as well as their victims, come from a variety of backgrounds and age groups. This just shows that anyone could be a serial killer. You will come across at least 36 serial killers in your lifetime. They will have a wide range of reasons and motives, and some might be suffering from mental issues. These are the usual perpetrators who get caught easily because they do not act rationally compared to those who are deemed normal in society. I'm sure this next one will freak you out a bit. Serial killer Ed Gein skinned the body of his victims. Edward Theodore Gein, or Ed Gein, had the nickname, the Butcher of Plainfield. He's an infamous serial killer who's known for skinning the bodies of his victims. Because of this, his story became the inspiration of many films and books like the novel, Psycho. Police found the gutted and headless body of a missionary woman in Gein's farmhouse in November 1957. Along with it, authorities also discovered human skulls and suits made from skin and parts of the human body. He told police that he did this to all of the bodies to remember his mother. Since he was found to be mentally unfit, he was sent to Wisconsin in a mental state hospital. The judge found him guilty of insanity, so he spent his days in the hospital instead of a prison cell. Gein died on July 26, 1984 due to cancer. Get this. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre is an American slasher film from 1974. The main protagonist of the story was Leatherface, a person or creature who skins people alive and tortures his victims to death. The inspiration for Leatherface's character was the serial killer, you guessed it, Ed Gein. Although the film was initially marketed as based on true events, the plot was fictional altogether. It's interesting to know that these serial killer facts are somehow linked to films and novels. Do you have a favorite? That wraps up our 10 chilling serial killer facts. Don't forget to smash that like button and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. See ya!